What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Montana Method podcast one more time. As always, your host, Nelson Rodriguez Jr., author and creator of Montana Method. Today, I have a great show, a great guest for you, Mr. Mario Knapp, candidate for Miami-Dade County Sheriff. You heard right. We have a sheriff's office now. I didn't know. You didn't know. Nobody really knows. We're going to get into all that today. I have a ton of questions for him. I've heard nothing but great things about this guy. That's why I invited him here. I know typically I don't talk about these kinds of things in the community and what's going on, but I thought this was so important that we're going to talk about it today, and I'm very gracious to have Mario here in my space, so kick it.
I've been out here hustling all my life. Every day we get into it. Really out here in these streets. Day and night. Like there's nothing to it. When I was going through it, dog, I never got your call. I never asked for nothing, no. But now I want it all. Promise I'ma do it. Came from rags to riches. Rags to riches. Came from rags to riches. Rags to riches. Came from rags.
Nelson, thank you for having me. I did a little research. I started looking at some of your stuff, and I love this thing. This is we're all from Miami, so we grew up here. This is very Miami, very Miami.
There's Tony Montana in Miami is like, it's like Biggie Smalls in New York. It's.
I had a friend in the SWAT team who one day stopped. He's like, guys, shut up. You guys do realize Al Pacino's not Cuban. It almost broke my heart.
Yeah. Bro, but let me tell you, you can't name another fictional Cuban character in cinema. And he did, for being an Italian from New York, he did such a good job. Yeah. He got the little mannerisms down. Oh, yeah, man, what's up with you, man? All that stuff. I really enjoyed the movie, and it's funny because in hip-hop, Tony Montana's a god, right? But it's like, yo, he's Cuban.
Right.
How do you guys deify this guy? But yeah, I talk about it all the time. We're very underrepresented, and the fact that Tony Montana is so popular 4 years later.
Right.
I'm proud of it. Even though it is a drug dealer and he's crazy and all that stuff, there's a lot of good lessons you can learn in that movie.
Yeah. No, it was one of my favorite movies for a really, really long time. And I was a little kid in New York when I saw it. So to me, he sounded 100% Cuban. You know what I mean? Because we didn't hear a lot of Cubans in Washington Heights.
Right.
But yeah. Very good movie.
That's interesting. I have a friend. He's an artist. He's a rapper named Don Dinero. I don't know if you know of him. No. He was a big deal back in Miami. He made a couple big songs. He was actually the first big Cuban artist that kind of came on the scene even before Pitbull. Right. And he's from Washington Heights.
Right.
Yeah.
Don Dinero. Huh? Maybe I know him.
Yeah. Maybe if I'll play you some of his music later. You probably know who he is.
Right.
But interesting. Okay, so you weren't born in Miami.
I was born in Miami.
Okay.
I just did part of elementary school in Washington Heights, New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know there was a big generation of Cubans that were in the Union City kind of,
Yeah, that's in New Jersey. So my family history, they're from Cuba.
Okay.
My last name is weird. My last name is German, and I have a whole story about that. But there was apparently, so my grandfather was a lieutenant for the army of Batista.
Okay.
And obviously, after Fidel took over, they had to hightail it, and they did. So they came to Miami initially, then they went to New York, had some part of their life in New York, and then eventually moved back to Miami. We were born, my brother and I, and then we did some of elementary school here, moved to New York for 5 years, and then came back. And I finished junior high and high school here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So what got you into, you've been a cop all your life? Like, talk to me about that.
I did. I started, my brother and I were the first two brothers in the same police academy in Miami-Dade. I started at 20 years old. So I wasn't even old enough to buy a gun.
And you were already in the police academy. That's crazy.
Yeah. So my first gun I bought with my mom at the gun store, and I embarrassingly have to stand next to her and go, hey, that's the one I want. Because I wasn't old enough to buy a gun.
Right.
And so we did that, and then I started to kind of move up the ranks. I was an officer first in what's called now Midwest District. Back then it was called Doral District, where the city of Doral is.
Where we are. Yeah.
Exactly. Started there, then went to a unit called HUD, which is basically the projects in Liberty City. We had HUD North and HUD South, Modelo, Naranja, all of that is south. And up north, the Liberty City area. And then I went to the SWAT team. and I did that for 5 years. I was an operator in the SWAT team, and then I became an instructor in the SWAT team.
Okay.
Left there and went to the training bureau, just because I knew I was going to get promoted to sergeant, and I wanted to get off the pager for a little while. For about 3 or 4 months, I just needed to kind of decompress.
Right.
And I did, and then I went to Kendall. I'll try to shorten it up. I went to Kendall as a uniform sergeant. Then I went to the narcotics bureau. I was a sergeant in the tactical narcotics team. Did that for about a year, and then got brought back to the training bureau where I became I was a defensive tactics instructor. But in that capacity, I also became the use of force subject matter expert for Dade County, which is a pretty big job, and it's very unique for a sergeant to write global policy throughout the whole department. Like usually a sergeant will say, I'm going to write a policy for my squad. Here I was, young sergeant, teaches you to grow up really quick, writing policy for the entire agency on use of force, which is the most litigious area of law enforcement.
Right, and it's a big issue nowadays.
For sure. And so I wrote all of that. We did all the training, and then the interesting part about that is as a sergeant, I had to write professional opinions for internal affairs investigations, for a county attorney's office, for the state attorney's office, for the director, and defend I had to testify in cases if it came to that, right? In either defense or against
what
officers,
what
right?
happened.
Yeah. So then I got promoted. I got promoted to lieutenant. I worked in the Port of Miami for a little while. I was one of the commanders of the Port of Miami, and then I got pulled over to the Robbery Intervention Detail, which is RID. It's the Miami-Dade County's probably most high-profile crime suppression initiative or violent crime suppression initiative in the county. So they're looking for what I like to call all the time the wolves of Wall Street. They're not looking for, a bag of marijuana. They're looking for guns, they're looking for robbers, and they're looking for stolen cars, because you need any combination of those three to go out there and wreak havoc in the county. So we did that, and then they brought me back to the training bureau where I oversaw all tactical and force-related training, everything from shootings, the whole thing. Then after that, got promoted again. I became a captain. I became a captain for Northside District, Liberty City. Then I went from there back to the training bureau. They brought me back where I oversaw all training in Miami-Dade County. And I established the active shooter initiative for Miami-Dade County. And then years later as a captain, I wrote and I independently grew what we call now the mass casualty attack protocol, which is, we changed it from active shooter to mass casualty attack. It was the first time that we in Miami-Dade actually put together a group and a policy that represents all of Dade County, including fire, because I brought in a fire chief, we brought in dispatchers, not just PD, but the whole county.
Right.
So did that, left the training bureau, became a captain in the Kendall district, then was a captain in the Warrens Bureau, and then was I acted as the chief of communication for the Miami-Dade Police Department, got promoted there, and then I became the major back in SWAT. So I was the major of Special Patrol Bureau. Special Patrol Bureau is unique because most majors are like the equivalent to a police chief in a smaller agency. So, for example, a major of an area is a geographical area, kind of like saying Coral Gables.
Right.
Right? And then Miami Beach has a chief, but if it were in Miami-Dade, it would be a major, right? The unique thing about Special Patrol is that we offered police service to every single corner of Miami-Dade County because I had, under my command, I had the SWAT team, the bomb squad, the aviation unit, so all the helicopters, all the airplanes, the Marine Patrol unit, the motors unit, the divers unit, the canine unit, the incident management team, which is why I spent I'd say about the last 33 days of my career at the Surfside building collapse. I was I was the commander for the command post. And then we had our Special Events Bureau that does all security for events like the Marlins games, the Dolphins game, F1, Super Bowl, all those big events. The Floyd Mayweather against Logan Paul.
That must have been a circus.
I brought my son to that one. That was my career in Miami-Dade pretty much.
So, a couple questions. What era was that? Like what? Because you talked about all the different. You were SWAT, narcotics. You worked at. So what era? 80s, 90s, 2000s.
So SWAT, it was late 90s,
late 90s,
early 2000s.
Okay.
Very early 2000s.
Okay.
Narcotics was about 2003-ish.
Okay.
Subject matter expert for use of force was in the mid 2000s to late 2010.
Okay.
more or less. My
Because-
timelines are really bad. I don't remember what year I got promoted to any rank.
Oh, wow.
And I know people that'll say I became a lieutenant on this day.
On
and
this day,
I
yeah.
don't remember any of that. My brain doesn't think
work that way.
I remember timelines. I know that I was in. I'll give you an example. The reason why I know when I was in SWAT because I remember we were in the SWAT team during Y2K. Do you remember that?
Yeah, of course.
A lot of people, a lot of the young guys don't even know what
Yeah,
that
I
is.
remember. It was the end of the world. And
Yeah.
then, oh, my God.
So we were, and I still have pictures, which is why I remember so vividly that we were with all our gear and everybody. I'm calling my wife, hey, Happy New Year, but we're
Right.
all as a team waiting for the world to end.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because we were on call, so we had to be ready to go anyway.
That's crazy. Oh, man. Just as a cop sitting there waiting for like everything to fall apart. Oh, my God.
Yeah, nobody knew what to expect. And
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like the world was going to blow up, but
People could have reacted very crazy in a very crazy manner.
yeah, the understanding that we had was never really that zombies were going to go and none of that.
Yeah,
The understanding we had was that computers at the time weren't going to be able to handle all the zeros in the year.
right.
And so when that happens, remember, this is the understanding we had at
The
the time.
concoction we made up. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what we heard was the issue was going to be that banking was going to stop, computers were going to stop, no more internet, no more
Like
nothing.
technology was going to fail. basically.
Everything was just going to stop. And now where the distress was going to come from is when people can't go to the bank and get money. Now we're going to have robberies. It's just going to turn
Riots
into a mess.
and insane.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was what the expectation was.
I mean, I could imagine being, man, must have been so stressed out. That must have been nuts. Just, waiting for like mass chaos.
Well, I was really young at the time too, so it was like we were like, all right, let's see what's going to happen. It's just a weird thing.
It's a weird.
Yeah, we were prepared, but it wasn't like we were expecting zombies. We just thought the idea that was presented to us was that society was going to start to deteriorate because computers were all going to go down.
We're all gonna go down.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen recently that the Obamas made that movie on Netflix. What's it called? Leave the World Behind or whatever. And there's like a reoccurring theme in movies about EMP blasts and Civil War and all this stuff. And people are starting to get they're on edge, which I could go on about Hollywood and subliminal messaging. Don't even get me started on that.
Right.
But now I've seen that kind of, you remember that movie, what was it, 2012, when the Mayan calendar and all that stuff?
Yeah, I'm not a big movie guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
If
basically,
it's not Scarface, I'm not.
this is my kind of guy right here. See? No, but basically every decade I notice there's some sort of theme with the world ending, quote unquote.
Right,
There's always like a Y2K. Before that, it was something else. It's always some sort of weird thing. I try not to get too involved. I refuse to watch the news because the news is going to drive you insane.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because the news is mainly reporting on the type of work you did.
Yes. But the news gets it wrong a lot.
Yeah, on
what I mean?
purpose.
Yeah, I would say that there's parts of it where they're gonna inflate something
Of course.
or not cover something on purpose, but
Right.
but a lot of times it's just misinformation.
Sell a story.
Yeah.
you know?
There's things that like in the police department that I think that we could have improved a lot, right? And it's part of what we want to do with the sheriff's office and is keep people more informed and more up to date sooner rather than later. Because what happens is, if you don't give them the news, they will make it up.
Somebody else will report it, and in their way.
Exactly.
Exactly.
They'll make it up, and then it's harder to convince something or convince someone that what they heard didn't happen,
Right.
than it is to just tell them the first time what happened. And bad news doesn't get better with age.
100%. And typically, that's like the prerogative with news nowadays. It's not about being right or being wrong. It's about saying it first.
Right.
Which is ridiculous. Your job as a journalist should be to report the truth.
Exactly.
But that's sensationalism. And now with social media, don't even get me started. How they cut these short clips and they take them out of context.
Right.
It's nuts.
It's funny you say that because what I just said is one extreme, right? And then
Right.
there's the other extreme when we're trying to give a story too early and we mess it up. I'm going to give you a quick example. I'm a captain in Northside District in Liberty City. There was a house that was abandoned, boarded up, and stuff like that. Well, the house catches fire.
Okay.
The house catches fire, and obviously fire's there. We start to think, well, if if it's an abandoned house, how does the house catch fire?
Somebody started the fire.
Yeah,
Right.
and, so, and not only that, could there be somebody in there?
Right.
Right. And so what we find out from a neighbor is that there's a homeless guy
Living in there.
that lives in there. So we're like, okay, well, now I get a call from a chief. Hey, we need to know, is there a body in the house? And I'm like, well, fire is just pulling up. We'll let you know. 15 minutes later, I need to know right now because the media is asking. And I said, well, they're just getting the fire hoses. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want me to do? You want me to turn off the fire and inspect the place and then let the fire?
Exactly.
It was just a weird thing. But that lasted probably for about an hour.
Of just constant calling
Constant
you, hey, what's
calling
going on?
to
What's
the point I'm like, well, I will let you know when we hear something. I mean, with all due respect, we can't get ahead of ourselves, and I'm not going to make a story up to then embarrass ourselves.
Exactly.
So we got to have a balance between not giving wrongful information too early, right? But not holding the information that we already have that's we've confirmed.
Yeah.
We can't hold that for too long. There's got to be a balance. Yeah.
I agree. And like I said, today it's become like a bit. It's hilarious actually, kind of how the news is just, it's sensationalism completely. It's not about informing people. It's not about giving you the information, the important information. It's about giving you a biased opinion of how things should be based on this person's view of the world. And if you don't agree with them, you're a conspiracy theorist. Right. You know,
also, I think it's important to, I mean, like nowadays, we got to define what is the news. Because
100%.
anybody takes a video. Look at what happened the other day with Bayside and
With
the
the
aliens. Somehow they tried to I got caught up in that for like 13 seconds in that whole thing. So apparently a video comes out. I'm at an event and some guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you sure this is not you?" And he shows me a picture of a bald guy. I guess we all look alike.
Right.
And he says, "Is this not you?" And the guy's saying something about some kid or some dude said, "Hey, I called my father. He's a cop. He's running for sheriff. And here's what he told me." And he has a video of a guy saying, "I can't talk about it. I know what happened, but I can't." Something like that. Because I didn't pay too much attention.
Right.
Looking at I told the guy, I said, "That's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know who that guy is." And that's my son, because my son was there. I don't know who that guy is. And he's like, "No, that looks like you." About an hour later, there's a bunch of Twitter. I'm
like
on
Twitter
Twitter.
posts?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, but I don't really follow Twitter. But now I see that there's another guy that says, "Oh yeah, that's him. I verified it. It's Mario Knapp, and he is running for sheriff." And I'm sitting there like, and I post back. I go, "Guys, not for nothing, but
It's not me.
that's not me, and that's definitely not my son." And another guy, "Oh, he hates kids." It was the funniest thing I've ever seen, and I just let it go. I mean, what am I going to do?
But that's what social media has become. It's a bunch of people who are misinformed,
Right.
who are giving opinions about something that they know about. You weren't there, you didn't see it, you don't know nothing about it, but you want to give your opinion about it. It's like,
Right.
and then you have another guy who's giving opinion about this guy's opinion, and then it spirals into a big.
No, and then
ball
the
of-
funny thing is, you say, "Guys, that's not me, and that's not my son," and then they want to throw. I'll just say they want to throw shade at why you don't want to be involved, why you must be hiding the fact that was you.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
No, I know that guy, and yeah. Oh my god, bro. Take it from a podcaster that does social media basically for a living.
Right.
I just don't read the comments anymore. I see that somebody commented on it. If I don't personally know the person, I just try not to even read it.
Yeah.
You know, because
I know the feeling.
trust me, and especially the way social media is set up, how they're quick to defend. Like if someone reports that, "Oh, this guy, he's posting whatever," and they report you, they're quick to punish you, but they don't notice the 1,000,001 comments you're getting of people saying really hateful, even some violent stuff.
Right.
But I don't know. It's whatever, you know. But to you, no, oh, shame on you for you know.
Yeah.
It's weird. Twitter is a little more relaxed in that sense. They're more kind of like the Wild West. They let everybody do. You know, there's like people who post adult videos on there. Don't it's pretty crazy. Yeah, Twitter's like, but Instagram and even TikTok is they're a little too strict.
Right.
You know,
I get it.
they're run by, you know, they shall not be named.
Right.
You know how that is.
I get you.
So Mario, you've been a cop a long time. I've never really sat down and had a conversation with a police officer about Miami. In today's age, I do have to say Miami is a model for law enforcement, which is interesting. I never thought I would say that, but it is my view of things as of right now. throughout the insanity of the last 4 years,
Right.
Miami has really kept it together, especially with the amount of people that have moved here.
Mhm.
They have the amount of people who don't know the city, don't know what it's like, New Yorkers, Californians, all these people that are moving from all these places. And Miami's really held its own. Like,
Right.
there's no real stories of the craziness that goes on in these other cities.
Yeah.
And
I think when Miami-Dade PD, so it used to be, it's funny because I travel a lot too, right? As a subject matter expert, I travel a lot. I travel a lot training people. And anywhere in the world that you go, when you say you were in Miami-Dade, or back then it was Metro-Dade, there were like, there was NYPD, there was LAPD, and there was Miami-Dade, or Metro-Dade, right? And those were the three big ones. We've kind of lost that already.
Yeah.
We've begun to decline, but the reason why I think, like you say, we still become, or we're still looked at as a model, even though the department is kind of falling apart a little bit, right? The residual of the level of professionalism we've had historically,
Right.
there are still people holding up the beams, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean?
100%.
We have a really young department. The culture has changed a lot, and there are still some old school guys in there that are literally holding up the beams and trying to keep it all afloat.
Right.
But I think if we don't go in there and get the right management in there, I think we can lose that.
That's important.
Yeah.
Another important thing that I've noticed about Miami is that since we're interestingly enough, we're a city that's the majority is a minority. Like most of us are Hispanic. So from what I've seen and been able to understand a long time ago, maybe in New York, the Italian cop grew up in that Italian neighborhood, and he was the cop in that neighborhood. Like friends of mine who are older have explained this to me. Back in the day, the cops were from the neighborhood.
Right.
So it was different. Like, they had a personal relationship with the people. They would get a phone call about some husband that's beating up his wife, and he would show up and be like, Tommy, what are you doing? So in Miami, it's not, obviously we're a bigger city, it's different, but still, you know, all of us are Hispanic and we kind of know how each other are. So I think there's that kind of connection there too as well. So there's an understanding of the culture at a basic level that other cities kind of don't get. So I understand that too. But aside from that, I'm just fairly, aside from all the craziness that we were talking about before we turned on the cameras, politicians are not welcome on my show, especially Miami politicians, because the insanity that goes on here is just, it's nauseating.
Right.
So I was interested when I found out about, so let's get into why I invited him. No one even knows that there's been a transition from Miami-Dade Police Department to Miami-Dade County Sheriff's Office. Right. So tell me a little bit about how was it presented? When did it become official?
Yeah. So there's 67 counties in the state of Florida.
Okay.
Every single one, up to and including Miami-Dade, has historically had what's called a duly elected sheriff. So a sheriff's office.
Okay.
Remember, cities have police departments.
Right.
Counties have sheriff's office.
Have sheriff's office.
Right. And with a sheriff. Now, we had it up until about 1966.
Okay.
1966, go figure, Miami, we had a corrupt sheriff. Yeah, go figure. So what ends up happening is, remember, there's a lot of reasons, but that was back when the mob left Cuba. Castro kicked them all out. They slide up, that kind of thing. And so supposedly that's where all the ties started to happen. And so this guy, there was corruption around the whole department. And he had, there were some grand jury indictments. He goes to jail. Now, at the time, it made sense. At the time, the local government couldn't risk having another election and an undetected member of that organization get elected, and same thing happens. So what they decided to do was change the charter to say, we're gonna change the sheriff's office. We can no longer call it a sheriff's office because we're gonna have an appointed position of director. So we'll change the title of sheriff to director. It'll be controlled by, at that time, I would think it was either the city manager, I think at the time. Later on, we got a strong mayor, and now it's the mayor. But that's what ended up happening. Now, that structure stayed intact all throughout the rest of the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s when I came on. And nobody ever really thought to go revisit it. You know what I mean? Or maybe if somebody did, it just never became public. It was never on our radar. In 2018, there was legislation that was passed, and it went to vote, and the public, Miami-Dade, including the state of Florida, voted to bring back the sheriff structure. And part of that reason was because what we talk about, when you have a politician running the police department, like a city would, and in this case, like we would, it lends itself to too much political influence.
150%, which is everybody's problem with it. Yeah.
And that's part of the decline in the U.S., I think. If you look at what's happening in Chicago, you look at Philadelphia, you look at New York, you look at San Francisco,
Los Angeles,
you look at all these places, the politicians have decided to use the police departments and the police officers as scapegoats to something that they don't even understand.
150%.
Right? Okay, so the public realized that and they said, no, we want to go back to an independently elected sheriff, right? And that's where we are now. So now we're going to go to vote for the first time. So that's the idea, to make the police body totally independent of any political influence.
And that's wow. And especially in a city, Miami, in a city like Miami, where you just everybody's fed up and nauseated with all the politics that go on.
Right.
To be able to have peace of mind to where the people can elect who is leading our police.
Exactly.
It just makes me feel safer, you know.
And it's more accountability.
Yes.
So you know, a lot of people, and there are the politicians don't like that this happened. So let's start by that. Let's just say that our county government was 100% against this thing happening. As a matter of fact, they tried to remove the power, and they said, well, we'll give you a small agency, but we're going to keep Miami-Dade Police. But that's interesting because I brought this to show it to you, and I've been parading this around a little bit because people don't understand it, but the politicians are going to lie to you, and there's a reason why, and I'll tell you why in a second. But we have always been a sheriff's office. This happens to be my major badge. I've had 5 of these. Because remember, I've been an officer, I've been a sergeant, I've been a lieutenant, I've been a captain in 5 different places, I've been a major. Every single one of them, what does that say in the middle there?
Deputy sheriff.
And around it, it says sheriff's office.
Sheriff's office.
Right? So this has been the badge since back then, since 1966.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So we are a sheriff's office. All the constitutional responsibilities have remained intact. They're all the same. Obviously, the governor can maybe adjust them if he wanted to, which he probably has. But the moral of the story is you're going to hear these politicians because they can't let go of the power. You're going to see a lot of Miami's recycled politicians, you know, the names that we've all heard and seen and, you know, whatever, probably start jumping into this race because they can't let go of the power. They can't let go of and I look at it and they're like, well, you're going to have a lot of power as sheriff. I'm like, I look down. I don't look to the sides. I've been a cop for 27 years. I've had every civil service rank in the department. I grew up in Miami. I was born in Miami. I have a vested interest in this place, but also I have a loyalty not only to the community that I've served for 27 years, but a loyalty to my kids that are going to live here, right? So the moral of the story is we need to make sure that this place doesn't fall into the hands of. I mean, look around. Look at how many politicians have been arrested. You know what I mean? It's almost embarrassing to say that I'm from Miami anymore.
It is.
And so a lot of the politicians don't like the idea. And by the way, it's not just politicians. It's employees. It could be county government employees. It could be anything. But one of the things...
at the end of the day, they're also benefiting off of that system, right? So it's the same difference. You know?
Well, they're afraid of a non-politician because they don't know if the non-politician is going to play ball. And so I've heard that verbatim.
But isn't that the problem? That when they play ball, they shouldn't be playing ball. They should be doing what's right. You know.
We live in a strange community. I'll tell you why. Because everybody that I talk to says the same. Everybody that I talk to says, "Get the politicians out of there. Get the politicians out of there." And then you mention some politicians, they're like, "He's a nice guy. I'll vote for him." I'm like, okay. So, but you know that's where we are. I guess that's politics. But. They haven't felt comfortable with the fact that one of the main things I want to do is bring back a totally independent public corruption unit. I don't care if you're a cop, if you're a high-level cop, if you're a county employee, if you're a politician, if you're a commissioner, it doesn't matter. If there's an allegation that you are corrupt, we should have an independent body that's going to be free to investigate you.
100%.
And you know what? Like in everything in police work, the cards fall where they may.
100%. And if there's nothing to hide, then there's nothing to hide, and you shouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, because right now they can literally tell you, investigate that guy, don't investigate this guy, focus there, but I don't want you looking here. Oh, and if you don't, you're fired or you're transferred or you're demoted because it's run by politicians.
That's insane.
But it's happened all over the country.
That's insane. Yeah, I think that you have to be a certain type of person to not want to let go of that power. Like, there has to be something, you know what I mean? Like a screw loose or I don't know. I've never been that kind of guy.
I don't know. Look, I'm not a politician. Obviously, I have to run a political campaign to get elected because there's no way it's an election, right? But I do think there's a difference, and I've always said there's a difference between a politician and an elected official.
100%.
There's a lot of people in county government that I really respect. Those are elected officials.
Right.
They go in there, they do the time, they make a difference, they have an intrinsic want, right, to help their community and everything else. And they go in, they make their changes, and they get out. And then there's the career politicians that get in
and never leave.
Stay in.
Yep.
And then find another, for example, you become the commissioner somewhere else, or you go, you can't let
There's
go.
no getting rid of them. They're a leech. It's like
Right.
they have this stranglehold on this system, and they change their title, and then they become this guy and become that guy. But no matter what, you always see their face, and until the day they die, they're a politician. It's too much.
Yeah.
You know. It's
and I've always said, remember the conversation we were having about some people say this, and
yes,
I've always said that never take a job you absolutely need. Never take a job you absolutely. If you need that job, you're going to bend over backwards for anybody to
for
keep
whoever.
it. And I'm not willing to do that. And so it's one of those things where I am running a campaign. We're running for this position. We're running for what we consider to be the right reason. And if we win, we win. But we're going to find out if Miami-Dade County voters have the tolerance to hire another politician, another recycled politician for this job.
I definitely don't think that's going to happen, just because of the history of the city, and people are, for the most part, not, I wouldn't say super informed, but they're aware. You know, we're all aware of who's real, who's not, who's being authentic.
Right.
And as a person, like I told you, that works on social media, what people are thirsting for now is authenticity.
Right.
When we see authenticity in somebody, when we see someone who's being real, who's really being themselves, versus this painted facade of the same old, like, suit and tie, te bonito, está afeitado, and like the slick back hair. It's like, it's they all look.
Come on, don't hit that.
But you know, like the Gavin Newsom type. They're just running on like the same things as no, man. We're tired of that. I for one would rather someone from our community who knows us very well, who's maybe more of a rugged guy, but isn't so clean cut, but gets the job done and really has a vested interest, like you said, in doing the right thing, and is maybe not totally, because you're human and you make mistakes, but at least you have morals and principles, because when you stick to these principles, we know we can trust them, And
I think, we're going to have to put value in experience too.
100%.
Right.
Yep.
So look, we're not, this is not a position, we're not going to be legislators. We're not going to write laws. We can try to influence laws to make things better. We'll go to Tallahassee and advocate for different things, but at the end of the day, we're talking about public safety. We're not talking about a politician. We're not talking about somebody who has to worry about the transition, like they're trying to fake you and they're trying to confuse you. That's just political talk. We need a police officer with experience. We need somebody that knows the department, because this is the biggest machinery in the Southeast United States. You're not going to walk in here having supervised 20 people and then all of a sudden say, or there are people in the race that haven't supervised a chicken wing. There's people in the race. So it's interesting, because I started this race, and our former director, his name is Freddie Ramirez. Freddie Ramirez is a good friend of mine. I love Freddie to death. I always have. Freddie and I used to ride together as sergeants in narcotics. And him and I share a story of a cigar that's just a funny thing between him and I. But I'll tell you the story, but it's kind of stupid. It doesn't go anywhere. But what I'm trying to say is I love Freddie to death, but Freddie was running, and I was running against him. It was me and him. We were the two like serious candidates in the race. And then Freddie had an unfortunate incident, and Freddie had to step out of the race. After that happened, there's 15 people in this race.
Wow.
15 people in this race. And what I tell the public, and I tell everyone, is, there's only 3 real candidates in there. I'm not going to say who they are. I think I'm one of them.
When you say meaning real police officers who have really done the job, who have really...
Well, so I don't want to be insulting. What I mean is that I think there's 3 people that can actually do the job.
Okay. That
I think have the experience, that have the knowledge, that have the aptitude, to take over this entire thing. I know, by the way, I know most of them, and it's sometimes it's weird to have to sit there and, my goal is to make this a clean race. My goal is I just want to talk about what I'm doing. but it's difficult to listen to people and they're talking to cameras and you're like, you did that? I've known you for 20 years.
You haven't
never
done
that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, it's one of those, it's just one of those things. So I tell everyone, look, the best indicator of future performance is past performance.
Past performance.
You cannot manufacture 27 years of boots on the ground experience in the most high liability units with the most, volatile assignments that you can have in the department. You can't make that up 3 months before the election. You either had that history or you don't have that history, right? Now, here's the thing that sadly, most of the public doesn't know what to look for. So what do? They see a badge, they see the guy on TV, and they say, well, he must be a cop. And if he's on TV, he must be a chief.
Exactly.
So what I would say is, like you said, you've never really talked to a police officer. Most people are like that. So it's very easy to kind of hoodwink somebody.
Right.
So what I would just say to the public, what I would say to everybody is, be really, really, really skeptical of every single one, because as of right now, remember I said I'm not a politician? Guess what? Right now I am a politician because I'm running a campaign.
Right.
So treat me like a politician. Be skeptical. Don't believe anything I say. Research everything I say. But research everybody else fairly too. The same. I'm asking you to be very skeptical. Look up everything I said. Look it up and fact check me. But fact check everyone else too. And I think that's where you're going to see the difference. So like I said, you can't make this up. You either have it or you don't.
That gives me a lot of confidence, because if what you said wasn't the truth, you wouldn't say, look me up,
Exactly my point.
If you were fabricating all these things, you wouldn't be so confident as to like, no, you can look into me, because that I'm saying what it is.
Right.
I like that. I like that a lot. So let's get into, what are the major differences that we're going to see once the sheriff is elected, as to like maybe a couple years ago when it was just a straight police department?
Well, so I think the difference that you're going to see is going to be dependent on who gets elected.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And why do I say that? Because the sheriff, the sheriff will report to the public, not to a politician. And so what that means is that the sheriff is going to be in control of the sheriff's office, right? So, you've heard that, I hate to say it, but the whole, there's a new sheriff in town. That actually means something.
That's the title of the episode.
Yeah. I didn't know that. You should have told me that earlier. But why does that become important? Because the sheriff is going to have a lot of authority. And I use the word authority. I don't use the word power. I use the word authority. But I rather use the word responsibility, because
it's more accurate to what it actually is.
Yeah. What I mean by that is I don't want to have power over anybody. As a matter of fact, all I want to do is make sure that you're safe so you can do whatever you need to do with your family, with your kids. You can go to work. Your business is protected. That's all I want to do. I don't want to control anybody's life. So what I'm looking for is not power. It's not authority. It's responsibility. I want to hold the responsibility of the entire sheriff's office on my shoulders and be responsible for everything the sheriffs do or don't do. I have to take responsibility for that. And that's what I'm looking to do. And that's what I'm going to do. Now, why will it look different with whoever gets the office? Well, because it's going to depend on what every sheriff's priority is going to be.
Right.
I have opponents that have one priority, and I'm like, okay, well, I mean, fine.
That's what you want to do.
It's not my priority.
Exactly.
That wouldn't be my priority. And my priority is, I'll tell you what I think we need right now. We need to bring Miami-Dade PD back to that professional era where we were leaders in the
100%.
industry, right? Where we were recognized by everywhere. Where if you look at the movie Cocaine Cowboys and you look at some of the detectives, they weren't lieutenants, captains, majors. It wasn't the director being interviewed. It was a detective.
Right.
That was the level of professionalism that we had back then. We had legends, being officers in uniform patrol. We had legends in the homicide bureau. You know what I mean? And that's what we had. And we kind of don't have that. We lost a lot of that professional culture. But what to stabilize the department right now, we need to prioritize public safety by having way more uniform officers on the street. We don't have them right now. It's almost like the priority of the department has not really been uniform patrol. And that's the backbone of any community. Why? Because crime is based on three things: opportunity, risk, and reward. right? Those are the three things. So there's little things that you can do to reduce the reward, right? Technology can do it, that kind of thing. But the main thing is the criminal, and by the way, this is from the perspective of the criminal, not of the cop, right? So how do you lower the opportunity to commit the crime? Well, you need more uniform presence. You need more officers on the street because that lowers the opportunity. You're not going to rob that old lady when
If
you
there's
have
a cop around the corner.
if there's a cop around the corner that can hear the scream.
Exactly.
You see what it doesn't have to see it, but can hear the scream. And then how do you raise the risk associated with committing the crime? Because we can't be everywhere. Well, to raise the risk to the bad guy, we need to improve our community relations. And we can do that. So the people that tell you you can't do proactive policing and increase community trust. And I'm like, no, yes, you can, because we already did proactive. You know what proactive policing was? Proactive policing, when you ask a cop, no, he's very proactive. Proactive in the 90s, what that meant for us, and this is not what I'm suggesting, but we knew that the more people you arrest, the more people you take off the street, the less chance that they commit a crime because, so it was, we'd go into, we're looking for drugs, we'd arrest everybody. You had a nickel, boom, boom, boom. We just arrested everybody, but we got a lot of other people in that net that probably didn't deserve to.
Okay.
Right? But it was done at the time because it was that zero tolerance. We're going to go and we're going to do that, and believe me, I believe in zero tolerance when there's a crime. Right now, what I'm suggesting we do and what we need to do is I call it protective policing, not proactive, but protective. Why? Because a lot of the neighborhoods, there's a lot of shootings right now. There's a lot of gun violence, right? I don't care who you are in any community that you go to. I don't care what color, race, religion, and everybody in that neighborhood has the right to feel safe, and they want to feel safe, and they want to let their kids in the backyard. But the problem is that if we don't fix that relationship with the community, when the shooting happens, they won't call you and tell you what
100%.
happened. You see what I mean?
100%.
So that's how you elevate the risk. You lower the opportunity, you elevate the risk by having good communication.
Which is the narrative that's been spewed into these, other cities where it's like, no, the police is an enemy. Okay, so who are you going to call when someone gets shot or there's an emergency? Don't dial 911, I guess, because they're the enemy.
Right.
They make up this narrative that makes no sense. We need police. They're the ones that make our neighborhood safe. They're the ones that take care of the things that happen. So if you create that narrative of that the police are the enemy, society's going to collapse.
Right. And it's collapsing.
Yeah,
and
it's happening.
And it's slowly creeping into Miami. We're seeing it. Last year there was an 18% increase in officer resignations and early retirements.
Wow.
Nationwide. And it's because officers just stopped feeling supported by their own police chiefs.
Right.
They stopped feeling supported by the community. They certainly stopped feeling supported by the politicians. And so most of the people will sit and go, well, I don't care about that. Well, that cop, what the hell? Find another job. I have to find, you know what I mean? A lot of people really think that way. But here's the reason why that's unsustainable. Because it affects you. It affects my 13-year-old. It affects my 17-year-old kid.
It affects everyone.
It affects everybody. And it's unsustainable, and here's why. Because it used to be that when I was a cop and when I became a cop in 1995, if we heard what we call a 3, like a hot call, let's just say a murder, a rape, a robbery, a shooting, a domestic violence, an in-progress
the more
call.
intense stuff. Yeah.
Where we're actually running a 3, which means we have lights and sirens. Even if I was approaching a green light, I had to slow down because I knew there were going to be 3 or 4 cops trying to get there faster than me. You know what I mean?
Right.
We were fighting to get there to solve the problem. And that's a healthy atmosphere to have because when your kids call the cops, they're going to get there.
Right.
Right now, officers are, get this, they're actually afraid to do their job. They've gotten to the point, and I'm not saying all of them, but there's a large majority of officers where the morale is so low and they feel so unsupported that you hear shots being fired or whatever it is. We used to leave. Now they don't. Now there's cops that sit there and go, "Yep, is that shooting? Yep. Well, I'll wait for the call to come out because, if I get there, number one, I can get killed. And by the way, let me tell you something. The cops aren't afraid of getting shot. I'm not saying they want to get shot. Don't misunderstand. But the cops will go to the gunfire, and they have historically. They will go to where the danger is, but they have to feel supported to get there. You know what I mean? Because if they get there and something happens, yes, there's obviously the danger that they get hit. Yes, there's the danger. There's a million other dangers. But if they do the right thing, or they do what they think is right at that split second moment, and they don't get supported by their command staff, you've lost that cop forever. And now you have cops that are at risk of, if I do this, I'm going to get relieved of duty. I'm going to get suspended. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to get sued. I'm going to lose my insurance, my wife. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you cannot have people second guessing themselves. You can't have it.
Especially in such a dangerous,
Right.
and especially, like I said, you guys are the front line.
Exactly.
The people who take care of the issues that keep society safe are police officers, whether you agree or I could care less about your political affiliation.
Right.
It's just the base of what it is. So when that person who is holding that line says, you know what?
Right.
Nah, I'm done.
Right.
That it opens the floodgates.
And
Quite
you know,
literally.
you did say something that I want to touch on, but you said something else earlier, and the defund the police thing. The defund the police movement is probably the most irresponsible movement I've ever heard of.
I can't think of one that's any dumber than
It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why? Because if you're blaming that the cops have training issues, then you spend more money in training, not less.
100%.
Because a well-trained officer is a composed officer. A composed officer is a professional officer capable of making better decisions under stress.
100%.
You know what I mean? If there was any element, right? And I've been training for a long time. I train all over the world. You know, I literally. And if there was anything that I can teach a cop, that I can grab their head like a jar and put one attribute in there, it wouldn't be fighting. It wouldn't be intelligent. It would be composure. If I can grab it and go, stick composure in there and close it and shake it up, and now you're a composed cop, that's what I would give you 100% of the time. Because when you're composed, you can make better decisions. If you are out of control, that's when mistakes happen. So what is the common denominator in all of this? We need to train cops to be more composed, right?
And that's fund the police, not defund the police.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah. And by the way, so you mentioned political affiliation. I have never in my life, and I don't know of a cop who ever has, walked into a house and said, what's your name, date of birth, and political affiliation, ever. And whoever did would go to jail. If I become sheriff and I heard somebody did that, he's out the next day. I've never seen that happen. There should be no politics in policing, and that's what I plan to do in the sheriff's office.
100%.
I need to hold, like I said, I have to take responsibility, put it on my shoulders, and remove all the political stuff out so that the officers
Can do their job.
can do what they have to do, independent of any political, any political leanings anyway.
100%. If you look at the countries that have fallen apart in the world, the policing is a mess.
Right.
Let's go to an extreme. Let's look at Cuba. Let's look at Venezuela. Let's look at North Korea. Look at all these places where the world is just in chaos.
Right.
The policing is disastrous.
Right.
I've been
And super corrupt.
no, that's not even
Super corrupt.
corruption. It flies. South America, any country in South America,
Right.
Brazil, all these crazy places where you hear all these stories.
Right.
The police is just a mess.
Right.
So, again, I'll repeat what I said. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. At the end of the day, when you're in danger and you need help, you're gonna call 911. And if you don't have that relationship in your community where you can depend on each other or at least trust each other to where they're going to do their job the right way and you're going to feel safe, then guess what? More of what you called 911 for is going to happen.
Right.
And again, for the most part, Miami has kept it together. And that's one of the main reasons I could never leave this place. Aside from my pastelito across the street, which, oh my God. And then now being able to buy un pastel de guayaba is like, dude, or get my little Cuban breakfast. That, I can't imagine living a day without speaking Spanish. Those things, aside from that, is that Miami is a pretty safe place for the most part.
Yeah.
In light of what you've been saying.
No, it is. What I'm saying is we're inching towards the other way.
Which is not
We're
good.
beginning to inch that way.
which is not
I'll
good.
give you an example of how we're inching to it and how politics has influenced things. Don't you find it strange with the immigration problem, right? That there's
the thing that's
thousands
happening
of
in
people.
Texas right now with, oh my God, that's
Yeah.
insane.
So think about that, and then now think about, all right, when when these people, and I'm not saying it's illegal immigration, but let's just say that they're not criminals when they get here. Let's use that.
Let's say they're normal people.
Let's follow this and its logical conclusion. They can't find a job and they can't do anything. They're going to have to feed their family. So following it to its next, like peeling an onion, they got to find a way to make money. So what do? They got to find a way to make it illegally because they can't get a job legally. So it's either going to be they're going to sell drugs or they're going to have to feed their family.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Right? Unfortunately, right?
It's human desperation. It is what it is.
And I can't even say that I don't understand it. I understand it. We'd be put in the same position.
But it's illegal.
But it's illegal. But here's the problem. Fentanyl is a huge problem.
Oh my God, bro.
And they're not really reporting it the way it's happening. Why is fentanyl so dangerous? Because it's not just heroin users no, they are disguising other medications and everything and lacing it with fentanyl.
100%, yeah.
So there's a lot of people that are dying that think they're taking, I don't know, something else and they're getting killed. There's kids. My issue is, how is it then that the Miami-Dade Police Department, I was a sergeant in the tactical narcotics team, they are the ones that do street level narcotics at the highest, pace. And why do we no longer have a tactical narcotics team? Why did we get rid of that? We're seeing the fentanyl deaths come up, yet tactical narcotics team still doesn't exist. They don't even do the operations,
Wow.
The election occurs, it's going to be August 20th, the primary. The general is going to be in November during the presidential election. And then the sheriff will start on January 7th. In 3 weeks, when I win, in 3 weeks, TNT will be on the street already. Why 3 weeks? It's going to take me a week to fix the office, a week to put together a team. You know what I mean? All the same week,
right.
And 2 weeks for the transfers to happen. You know what I mean? Because we need to give people 2 weeks. That's just part of knowing the inner workings. But
so is narcotics? So that's not like a priority within the police department right now?
I can't even say that it's on the radar. There's districts.
There's nothing being done about drugs.
I'm not. I wouldn't say that there's nothing being done, but there's nothing being done in a centralized level. So Narcotics Bureau has several
levels.
But you got to remember that every district. Remember, I told you every district has its own kind of like its own little city.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And every district has a GIU, General Investigations Unit. They have a CST, Crime Suppression Team. CSTs will generally do every kind of investigation, anything. Right. The problem is that we in TNT, we used to, when we were not full-time, we used to supplement with CST people and bring them in. And so they work collaboratively. But what I'm trying to tell you is we used to have a dedicated tactical narcotics team out of the headquarters bureau or out of headquarters that just went everywhere, all over Miami-Dade County. It was a group of 40 cops, with a lieutenant. Actually, it was 2 lieutenants.
Who only dealt with this.
Did street level narcotics. That's all they did. Because what you do is, and by the way, let's talk about the methodology behind that, right? Because, there's the marijuana thing, right? It's almost decriminalized right now. Nobody's going to arrest anybody. And I understand, but at the end of the day, it is against the law.
Right.
And if they're selling out of that house, that's a quality of life issue for every neighbor around it. So just because they decriminalized it and we're not doing it, that doesn't mean I'm not going to enforce it for all the neighbors in that area when you have people coming to buy drugs the entire time. And then here's the problem. With drugs, we consider every search warrant a high-risk search warrant if there's a nexus to drugs.
Okay.
Why? Because we were the kings of this during the 80s.
Of course.
What do they protect their drugs with?
Guns.
With guns. So there's an expectation that where there's drugs, there's guns.
There's guns.
And so the way TNT works is we'll go and we'll catch the buyer. Then we'll catch the buyer, and we'll catch the buyer. And we're watching the buyer put it in his front right pocket. We wait till he gets 2 blocks, grab him. What are we doing? We're building the case for the seller.
Right.
Now we build the case for the seller. We grab him. Now we confiscated. We got all those drugs. And we know that drug hole is going to probably open in a week. But for a week, it's not. And we recovered all the guns that were in the house. You know what I mean? And now we'll keep doing it because now we're just going to stay on them until finally the guy moves. It displaces it. But in the meantime, and the judges will tell you, yeah, but these arrests, but they're forgetting that there's residual effects from all of those arrests, because now every single one of those people that we arrested, there's a possibility that they're going to flip and open another investigation for us.
Right.
You see what I mean? And now we're always looking for the bigger fish, but we have to start small. Kind of like mob stuff. You know what I mean? You catch this guy, he gives you the
guy.
Yeah, then he gives you the capo. Then the capo wants to give you the underboss, and the underboss, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's so that's insane to think though, because like you said, with the fentanyl problem we're having in the United States, that's one of the main reasons I try to tell kids nowadays, like, it's not worth it to try drugs. It's not because I'm like, oh, I went through that phase. I did as a kid, but it's not worth it anymore. You could think you're trying cocaine or trying this and that, and then that's it. You die.
Yeah.
Because.
Yeah. No, it's a problem. And now with remember, they're legalizing it all over the place. And my concern with the legalization, I don't have a horse in the race, but my concern is I have kids.
Right.
I don't want to make it easier for my kids to have it.
I agree.
A lot of people, look, and there's a lot of marijuana advocates that'll say, yeah, but it's harmless. It's this. I'm a doctor. I've done it for 10 years. Awesome. But I don't want it easier for my kids. You do whatever you want. You're an adult.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But don't make it easier for my kids. You know?
My argument for marijuana is it should be legal at a medicinal level. Other than that, I'm not really in favor of the whole recreational thing. My personal opinion, any drugs for recreational use, it's a kind of a slippery slope. There is proof in other countries where they've legalized drugs. It is better for society, but and you could argue with the amount of people that are doing hard time for drugs and that kind of stuff. You know, my father, he's a good example. He did some time for having a grow house. You know, there's arguments both ways, but for the most part, I don't know. You know, I'm just another guy.
And that's the thing with this position of sheriff. It's going to be very easy. Like, you know, a lot of people try to ask political questions. What's your political view? I am not a politician. I will express my political view at the ballot box. That's where I express my political view. Right now, what I'm concerned with is protecting people's constitutional rights and making sure that we enforce the law. Is it legal or is it illegal? Or is it illegal? If it's legal, there's nothing I won't even, nothing. Don't worry about it. But if it's illegal, you know what I mean? It's
kind of falls in my territory.
Exactly.
I got you. Yeah. Just that you said something pivotal, constitutional rights. In an age where we're in a version of the United States where, and again, going back to politicians, they kind of wiped a big one with people's constitutional rights nowadays. It's nice to hear someone who's going to be an elected official where that's the main focus, because at the end of the day, we live in a country where we're promised, you know, these amendments and freedom of speech and, you know, pursuit of happiness and all this stuff. So for me, it's super important that people that can be trusted, that believe in these things, are put in positions to succeed, like a sheriff's office. Because at the end of the day, if it keeps turning into this power-hungry struggle between these people and our rights dwindle away, what's going to happen at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think politics has gotten so polarized here in the U.S. that it's almost, like I said, it's embarrassing. I feel like where we came from and the way we're viewed from the rest of the country right now, I think it's become embarrassing.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I was doing some dignitary protection for a politician that came down, and I was in SWAT, so we ended up having to do the advance, right? We go and we do our routes and everything else. And the guy that I was with was, I forget his title, but it was just imagine like a chief of staff for that politician. And we were talking, and he says to me, and by the way, you got to remember, this was in not even 2000. This was in 98 or 99. It was before 2000.
Yeah.
So this guy says to me, Mario, it's crazy the way things have gotten. He says, before, you would go to the, you know, wherever they're the House or whatever, the Capitol, and where they're arguing and this and yelling and, you know, arguing their positions. But once they hit the gavel and everybody's walking down the hall, The Republicans would look at the Democrats and vice versa, and they'd look at each other and go, man, you got me on that one. That was a good argument. That's good. Let's go get a drink. And they'd go, and they were still social. They would still
be
amicable. Willing to have a conversation with each other. You look at what's happening now, and it's embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like it's so polarized, and it's crazy. The one who suffers is the community.
The American people.
Yeah.
100%. The reason the United States is taken advantage of, and so I not to get into politics, but one thing about getting into wars in other countries, and I know obviously this is a global version of talking about the community, but the United States is always solving everybody's problems. And it bugs me because who the hell comes to help us when we have issues?
Right.
And I'm sure you're well aware, the United States has massive issues right now.
Right.
And no one is coming to help us. No one ever will because we're the big honcho in the world, right? So instead of worrying about everybody else's problems, we should solve our own. Mm-hmm. In an airplane, right? When an airplane's about to crash, you need to put on your own oxygen mask first, or before you help your kids or your wife. Because if you die, you can't help them.
Can't help the other guy, right?
And that's what's happening with the United States. If we don't help ourselves right now, we're on the verge of something very ugly. Mm-hmm. And then who's going to be there to help the rest of the world?
Right.
You know? And Miami is kind of like a microcosm of that. I think that's what's happening now is where we're fixing these issues because essentially it's come to the point where if we don't fix these issues, it's going to turn into a very serious problem in the near future. So
no, for sure. I get it.
And so Mario, last thing I did want to ask you, obviously across the country and not far from us, unfortunately, it's been a common occurrence, or maybe as more common than we'd like, these shootings with, like Parkland and all this kind of stuff. I have my own opinions about what we should do. Obviously, I'm not a police officer. What are some things as sheriff that you can reassure the people of Miami-Dade County? What are some things you can do for security in schools?
Right. Well, the first thing is, remember I said to do your research. There's no other candidate that has the experience that I have on that. I started our active shooter initiative. We started off with, we ended up buying the former mayor. We ended up convincing him to buy, I think it was at the time, 2,000 rifles for us. Why? Because we needed the offensive approach to be able to
handle that
back.
situation.
Right. Yeah. And then we realized, okay, I had a sergeant working with me, and we looked at each other and we go, we got the offensive, but we don't have the defensive. So we bought the ballistic plates for that to equip the officers, and then we looked around and go, okay, that's good, and we called it we just labeled it. In 5 minutes, I had the mayor on camera talking about the active shooter initiative that I had just made up. We knew what we wanted to do, but we didn't have an initiative. This was just, hey, he's here. Let's try to get him to, and we did it because we identified the deficiency. So then we said, all right, we really have to update our policy. So coincidentally, it was before the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas thing. I'm looking around, and we debriefed a lot of what's happening in the country, and then we saw the Las Vegas shooting, and then we saw, we continue seeing them, and I'm like, all right, we're not prepared right now for this thing to happen. And we can go for an hour on why, but we weren't prepared right now. And I said, no, we need to redo this. And I brought in the most argumentative people that I know. People that aren't just going to say, okay, sir, whatever. I brought into people that I know that are willing to argue with me.
Right.
And we went in there for 30 days. I brought in a fire chief. I brought in dispatchers. I brought in some guys that I know that are very good in incident command. Because here's the thing, and this is a problem, and it's inexperience in law enforcement. Somebody mentioned it yesterday at the forum, and I said, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And they say, no, we'll get the SWAT team to train us. And because we'll get SWAT to train us on active shooter. And don't get me wrong, I'd love the SWAT team to be there. They will never be there in time. They will never be there in the time. The last person that should be responsible for an active shooter is a SWAT team.
Because they're the last ones to arrive.
And we should have learned that in Columbine back in the 90s, but apparently we didn't. Right? So people are still stuck in that mentality. An active shooter scenario is a uniform patrol task, right? So to get back to your question, we came up with a program that I believe is a national model, right? We came up with, and not that I coined it, but in an oversimplified methodology, I put out a memo to the rest of the department the day after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and I put it out, and that's researchable. You can find it. So, like I said, research everything. I put something out that says everything an officer does on that scene is based on two things, two main priorities. Number one, stop the killing, and number two, stop the dying. We were ready and trained to stop the killing, but we weren't ready to stop the dying. And what I mean by that is we as cops have to be able to change our hat, right? And go in there. And what I mean by stop the killing is as long as there's rounds being fired, I don't care who you are, if you're a man, woman, it doesn't matter. If you are a police officer with a badge and a gun, you need to go in there and stop that guy from shooting. And I don't care if it's one of you or seven of you. You need to go in there and stop that guy, because there's an expectation by this community and by every child that's sitting there watching this happen that they're going to come get rescued by the cop that's there. So we need to stop the guy from shooting or killing. And then secondly is once that guy is either gone or disabled or neutralized, now we need to keep people from dying because there's people shot, and we need to be able to medically just apply a tourniquet and medically treat them. So we came up with a class called Tactical Wound Care. And now every officer has a tourniquet. Every officer is trained to do that. So there was we were in that room for over a month with the craziest arguments you can hear, but it was the right people in the room that were willing to argue. And sometimes they changed my mind and sometimes they didn't. But when we walked out of there, with collectively the best policy that we can think of. Now, one of the things that I will do as sheriff is in Miami-Dade, because of the way the law is written, we would provide part of that guardian thing. We'd provide an officer, which, by the way, that in itself is not going to solve the problem. Having an officer in the school by himself is not going to solve the problem. We had it at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Why are we following that blueprint?
Right.
We saw what happened there. There's a human element to that. You cannot guarantee that every officer is going to walk in. We'll deal with it after we find out he doesn't, but we need to get more resources there. So the way the law was written was that, we'll give it to Miami-Dade public schools, but not to private or charter schools. Wait a minute. That's a kid that lives in Miami-Dade County.
Right.
That's a Miami-Dade County. First of all, it's a human. It's a child, number one, no matter what county he's in. Number two, you are the Miami-Dade Police Department. We're going to be the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. I don't care what corner of this county is in. You're going to have a tactical response for any school that's there, right? And we're gonna have all preventive measures exactly the same. So that's going to be the commitment. There's a lot of things that can be done, but the main thing is having the department in a way that's principle based, not scenario based. Because a scenario, I can give you a specific scenario, and everybody may respond to that scenario a little differently. You can choreograph all you want, but I want it to be based on principles, right? And I mean uniform. I mean everybody. They're going to know that every decision that we make, every single decision, and not just on active shooter, but even on a traffic stop, is what we did fair? Did we show respect? And does it violate community trust? Those are the three pillars of this department, and that's what they're going to be. Those are the three. Every day we have a crime problem over here. Okay, we're going to solve the problem, but wait, the plan that we just came up with, is it fair? Is it respectful? And is it going to violate community trust? And those are the three pillars that we're going to work off of. And that's what I mean by it's so important to be principle based.
100%.
Yeah.
Your principles, if there's what I call non-negotiables. And as long as you follow those non-negotiables and you're principle based, your life just is going to turn out the right way.
Exactly.
I live my life based on certain principles.
Right.
So honesty, love, loyalty, and respect. Those are my four, and I always stick to those four principles. I start with honesty because I think the highest form of respect you can show somebody is honesty.
Right.
As long as you're telling them the truth, you're already respecting that person.
Even if the truth hurts.
Especially if the truth hurts.
Yeah.
Because you have to, it's easy to lie to somebody and sugarcoat something. That's easy because they're going to like you. It's hard to be the bad guy and tell them the truth because they're going to hate you for it. But you respect them because you told them the truth.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
I agree with that.
Honor. And that's a big part of the task you're taking on, honor. So
yeah, I think, and remember I talked about raising community trust. Part of that is we need to communicate with the community and let them know. I think that we need to open up our doors, and we need to have people come in, and we need to tell them how our protocols work, what our methodology is behind making decisions, why we do things a certain way, because then when the incident happens, once it happens, you can't try to fix the problem and put a Band-Aid on it. It's already spewed, you know what I mean?
Right.
But if they understood before the fact what our protocols are on how we make decisions, you may agree or you may disagree, right? But you're not going to 100% agree with me, but you're going to understand the considerations that were made for us to reach that decision.
Right.
And you'll be like, I don't agree with what you did, but at least I know why you did what you did. And in police work for a long time, we didn't do that. We were arms crossed, and we were like, I don't need to tell you anything. We're all cops, and you're going to listen to what we say. And it's like, no, that doesn't work today.
When you operate from a position of, oh, I'm better than you, it's not, it never works out.
People are much more tolerant of decisions if they understand the rationale behind
100%.
it. Yeah.
Transparency.
Exactly.
It's very important.
Exactly, for sure.
So, Mario, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you coming.
No, thank you.
No, of course. I like I told you, Miami is. I love the city to the death. I really do, and it's important for me that no matter what year we're in, what era we're in, that it's whatever I can do personally to make sure that Miami is in good standing and it can be in a better place because of something I did. What's better than that?
No,
So,
I agree with you. And maybe one day we'll come back and just debrief the movie. One by one, but I'll tell two things. We'll debrief the movie, but the other thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure it doesn't happen back in Miami.
Definitely, 100%. So, Mario, I usually wrap up the podcast asking 3 questions.
Yes.
So, the first question is, what inspires you?
My kids.
That's awesome.
My kids. I have a 17-year-old boy and a 13-year-old daughter, and they do. In fact, I say all the time, I got in trouble when I said this one day. I'm talking to he was a boss of mine, and he says, well, you owe that guy. And at the time, I don't have it right now, but I had my kids' pictures on my phone, and I said, I appreciate that, but I don't owe anybody anything. I go, you see these two? This is who I owe everything to. These are the only people I owe something to. And as long as I don't ever do anything that's going to embarrass them, then I'm good. So, yeah, there it is.
That's awesome, man. You saw, they're lucky. They sound like they have a great father to guide them in life, give them wisdom.
Right.
That's another thing that's important, that father figure in life that's lacking. That's why we see kind of some of the common themes in society nowadays. So a lot of lacking of like that fatherly wisdom.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I agree.
next question. I mean, we already know, but my next question I typically ask is, what's next for you? But we know what's next. He's going to win this election. So
we're going to win the election, and we're going to make Miami-Dade safe again.
Oof. That's music to my ears. And then lastly, how do you hope to be remembered when you're no longer here?
I don't know. I think people are generally going to forget. I just want my kids to remember. That's it.
That's awesome. I've never had that response.
Yeah. Yeah, because look, at the end of the day, we're living like in a grain of sand amount of time in a beach when you think about it.
Yep.
And eventually we'll remember us. You'll pass away, your family will remember, and then maybe a grandson, but once he's gone, that's it. There will be no history of you. And we think of the greats, with Muhammad Ali and everybody. Eventually that's going to be gone too. It's a small fraction of time. So I feel like you can only really affect the people that you really affect, right? So that's it. Yeah.
Mario, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you.
Have a good one. Thank you.
So how can people connect with you?
So you can go to the website, www.marioforsheriff.com. You can also go to Instagram, Mario for Sheriff, Facebook, Mario Knapp for Sheriff. On the website, you can join to be a volunteer there. You can volunteer for the campaign, help us out. We're gonna be expanding the war chest now in the next few months. So you're always welcome to help. And if you want to make a contribution there, if you believe in what I was talking about, every little bit, I tell everybody all the time, I'd rather receive $1 from 100,000 people than $100,000 from one person. So feel free to do that, and that's where I am.
Thank you, Mario. Appreciate your time.
Have a good one.
Alrighty, guys. That was another episode of Montana Method Podcast. Your host, Nelson. Special guest, Mario Knapp. Thank you again for tuning in. Push it to the limit. The world is yours. And if you're not chasing a dream, ladies and gentlemen, life is a waste of time. Until the next one.
I've been out here hustling all my life. Every day we get into it. Really out here in these streets. That's day and night. Like there's nothing to it. When I was going through it, dog, I never got your call. I never asked for nothing, no. But now I want it all. I promise I'ma do it. Came from rags to riches. Rags to riches. Came from rags to riches. Rags to riches. Came from rags.